Today's speakers are kindly asked to take the seats in the front row here with reserved signs, and we'll be starting in a couple of minutes.
Going around with short sleeves. I was feeling short sleeves. There were a community which had long sleeves with the anti-Semitic
Das ist only one.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Buon pomeriggio, or rather, buonasera. My name is Paulina Guzik. I'm a communications coordinator of this conference, and I have a pleasure to greet you here in Rome. And after months of working on this conference, we're really happy to have you in that room. Should you have any questions during this conference, I'm here along with our team to answer them. And we're meeting here today, and actually we can't talk enough about refugees and migrants in a globalized world today, but the issue that we're bringing here up at this conference is especially dear to us at the academic world. It's education. Just a technical note, if you would like to follow us on Facebook, we're on Facebook at 2IMRE, International Initiatives for Migrant and Refugee Education. We're on Twitter. We're also live streaming this conference at the Uni Gregoriana channel, so please follow us. And I have a pleasure to turn the microphone now to the words of welcome of Nuno da Silva Gonçalves, Rector of the Pontifical University, Gregorian University, Dr. Pedro Rubens, President of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, and Dr. Anthony Cernera, President of the Being the Blessing Foundation.
Dear Father Pedro Rubens, President of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, dear Professor Anthony Cernera, President of the Being the Blessing Foundation and President of the Center for Interreligious Understanding, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Rector of the Pontifical Gregorian University, it is an honor and pleasure to host the conference Refugees and Migrants in a Globalized World, Responsibility and Responses of Universities. In this occasion, I would like to express my gratitude to Father Pedro Rubens, President of our Federation, as well to Professor Anthony Cernera, who have taken the initiative to hold this conference in Rome in partnership with the Pontifical Gregorian University. The Gregorian University was founded in 1551 by St. Ignatius of Loyola with the name of Roman College. Today, we form an academic community with more than 2,600 students coming from 120 countries. 53% of our students come from outside Europe, and this internationality gives us a clear sense of the issues the world is facing today. The Gregorian University is a founder member of IFCO, and I would like to remember on this occasion Father Hervé Carrier, a Canadian Jesuit, former rector of our university, and president of the International Federation of the Catholic Universities from 1970 to 1980. The program of this conference rightly states that universities do have a role and social responsibility as regards migrants and refugees issues and situation. Looking at our program, I notice very clearly two main aspects of our role and responsibility. The first is the teaching and learning about migration and refugee issues. And the second is the practical concern for the plight of refugees and vulnerable migrants. In fact, as universities, I am convinced that we can together play a major role in integrating refugees and migrants into host communities. At the same time, through our commitment to research and teaching, we will be able to contribute a fair deal to the decision-making at the political and social levels. I am certain that this conference will be a very important occasion for sharing experiences and concerns and for deepening our common commitment to one of the major issues of our time. For all these reasons, I am very pleased to welcome all the speakers, guests, and participants of this conference to the Pontifical Gregorian University. I wish you success in your work as you seek to understand better the questions and issues that this conference is addressing, as well as success in all your efforts to build a true ongoing partnership. Again, a warm welcome to all of you, and please do not hesitate to go upstairs, not today because it's closed, and have a look at the Gregorian University premises. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father. And now, Father Pedro Rubens, President of the International Federation of Catholic Universities.
Cher recteur Nuno Gonçalves, cher Anthony Cernera, et chers amis de la FIUC, mesdames, messieurs, nous vous sommes reconnaissants de participer à ce colloque organisé sur le thème Université, migrants, réfugiés, voir quel type de relations nouvelles on pourrait établir entre ces trois grands thèmes. Fruit d'une année de préparation, ce colloque a été préparé conjointement par la Fédération internationale des universités catholiques, qui réunit plus de 225 universités du monde entier, la Fondation Ben and Blessing, the Center for Interreligious Understanding et la Grégorienne, que nous sommes contents d'être là. Depuis plusieurs années déjà, à travers le monde, des universités se sont mobilisées en faveur des migrants et des réfugiés. Et parmi ces universités, certaines sont des universités catholiques membres de notre fédération. C'est en prenant conscience des actions menées concrètement par ces universités à travers le monde et en souhaitant également répondre aux interpellations du pape François sur le rôle des chrétiens pour se mobiliser autour de cet enjeu majeur de notre monde globalisé, que la Fédération des universités catholiques, avec ses partenaires, a souhaité organiser ces colloques sur le rôle, voire la responsabilité de la communauté universitaire. Les points communs de ces universités résident dans le questionnement éthique soulevé dans Laudato Si. Évoquant les exclus, le pape écrit, je cite, « Ils sont la majeure partie de la planète, des milliers de millions de personnes. Aujourd'hui, ils sont présents dans les débats politiques et économiques internationaux, mais il semble souvent que leurs problèmes s'y posent comme un appendice, comme une question qui s'ajoute presque par obligation ou de manière marginale, quand on ne les considère pas comme un pur dommage collatéral. De fait, au moment de l'action concrète, ils sont relégués fréquemment à la dernière place. Cela est dû en partie au fait que beaucoup de professionnels, des leaders d'opinion, des moyens de communication et des centres de pouvoir sont situés loin d'eux, dans des zones urbaines isolées, sans contact direct avec les problèmes des exclus. Ceux-là vivent et réfléchissent à partir de la commodité d'un niveau de développement et à partir d'une qualité de vie qui ne sont pas à la portée de la majorité de la population mondiale. Fin de citation, Laudato Si, 549. Tout au long de ces 3 jours, nous aurons à nous interroger sur la manière concrète, c'est une parole très chère au pape François, il a dit récemment dans la rencontre avec l'Université catholique portugaise, sur la manière concrète dont nos universités se mobilisent en faveur des migrants et réfugiés. Quelles actions ont été menées, quelles expériences pouvons-nous partager et diffuser demain dans le cadre d'un réseau spécifique? Donc, on va partir déjà des expériences concrètes, mais maintenant, l'enjeu, c'est former un grand réseau parce qu'aucune université, aucune nation peut répondre à l'auteur de ces grands problèmes internationaux. Comment nos universités ont-elles appris à travailler avec d'autres acteurs associatifs, mais aussi politiques? Cette mobilisation ne laisse pas indemnes nos universités. En travaillant avec et pour les migrants et réfugiés, nos communautés universitaires sont aussi interpellées et amenées à changer de paradigme. C'est par exemple notre prétention à l'universalité qui est mise au défi d'une ouverture concrète auprès des personnes qui n'entrent pas dans des catégories habituelles de nos étudiants, défi de l'accueil, défi de l'ouverture et de la discussion entre cultures différentes également. La mobilisation de la FIUC fait écho à l'interpellation du pape François à la communauté universitaire de la Pontificale Université catholique de l'Équateur et récemment à l'Université de Portugal. Êtes-vous capable d'encourager vos étudiants à ne pas se désintéresser de la réalité qui les entoure, à ne pas se désintéresser de ce qui se passe aux alentours? Dans Laudato Si, le pape nous exhortait « Pourquoi luttons-nous? Pourquoi travaillons-nous » Parce que le pape François, ici, ce n'est pas uniquement un leader catholique religieux, mais en tant que leader universel dans cette question. Et le pape François nous demandait de créer des espaces de vraie recherche et d'être concret, à la fois créer espaces de vraie recherche et d'être concret. Notre colloque s'y penchera de manière très pratique sur l'accueil de ces étudiants dans nos campus ou sur le travail que nous pouvons mener dans les camps de réfugiés. Comment accompagner des personnes qui ont souvent subi des traumas? Comment respecter des personnes en commençant par les reconnaître comme personnes disposant de connaissances et de compétences qui leur permettent d'accéder à nos cursus universitaires? Sur un plan plus académique, comment enseigner également sur les migrations internationales et la réalité de ces mondes de camps qui, aujourd'hui, constituent une réalité à part entière de la mondialisation. Ces colloques constituent une étape importante dans la réponse que nous pourrons apporter collectivement à cet immense défi éthique posé par la situation des migrants et réfugiés. Cette mobilisation concerne l'ensemble de la communauté universitaire, enseignants et étudiants. Laissons-nous donc nous interpeller mutuellement sur nos responsabilités. Acceptons d'être déplacés nous-mêmes dans nos habitudes, certitudes et concepts. Migrants et réfugiés nous amènent enfin à revenir sur notre vocation de pèlerin, depuis les premiers pas d'Abraham jusqu'au dernier pas de tout celui qui croit en Dieu. Mais nous ne pouvons pas revenir sur notre vocation abrahamique si nous ne centrons pas notre travail sur la dignité des personnes en situation de migration. Merci à tous et bonne conférence.
Merci beaucoup, Father. It is indeed a pleasure to be an answer to the call of Pope Francis and to be here at this conference. And as you said yesterday at the press conference, no university can help refugees by itself. That's why we're here together. And we're here together because Dr. Anthony Cernera had one wonderful idea in the summer. And now I'm sure he will talk about it. And I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Anthony Cernera, President of Being the Blessing Foundation.
Good evening. Bonsoir. Buonasera. It's wonderful for me to be back in this room because in November of 2009, I was reelected for my second term as president of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. I've not been back since, and I'm not standing for election, so it's wonderful, wonderful to be back. Maybe a little bit of the history of how we've gotten to tonight to inform what we're going to try to begin starting tonight. In this July of 2016, I was taking a walk. And I was thinking about the reality of the refugee crisis. And I thought about how sectors of the society were responding. Governments, international relief agencies, the religious communities. And being an old rector, I was rector for 22 years of a Catholic university in the United States, I said, well, what are universities doing? What's our mission, what's our responsibilities in response to this generational crisis? And you know the magnitude of the problem, at least as well as I do. 65 million displaced peoples in the world, 22 million of those refugees. Of those 22 million refugees, 51% of them are children, and most of those are children who are separated from their parents. In 2006, there were 8.4 million refugees. In 2015, 16 million, and today, 2017, 22 million. The numbers are staggering and perhaps beyond our ability to comprehend. So let me try to focus it a little bit more concretely. If there are roughly 113 people in the room tonight, and there probably are, there'll be about 150 of us through the conference, but if there was 113 of us in the room tonight, one of us would be a refugee. One out of every 113 people. That's the enormity of the problem. But the reality of the situation of refugees is not an isolated reality. And that's why we titled the conference, Refugees and Migrants in a Globalized World. Because the crisis also helps us to have a window into a larger set of challenges facing the human community. And perhaps, most fundamentally, the ethical questions that Father Pedro alluded to. What does it mean to be human? How do we relate to one another as human beings? What are our responsibilities to one another as human beings? And as educators, it's our principal responsibility to prepare women and men who will help to shape a more human world. So while our direct focus these next days is on the issue of refugee and migrants, it is our hope that it will allow us to reflect on the deeper social, political, cultural issues that we are facing as a human community and the deeper ethical and moral challenges that we face. So out of this walk in July of 2016, I said perhaps we should bring people from the university community and others together to talk about the role and responsibility of universities. So I called my dear colleagues at the headquarters of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, who responded very positively. The incoming new Secretary General responded positively immediately. My successor as president, Father Rubens, also said this is a wonderful topic for the Federation to be involved in. And before the new rector of the Gregorian even had a chance to move his books into his office, we had a meeting with him about the possibility of doing this conference here, and he, without any hesitation, agreed that this was a good thing for the Gregorian University to do, and so it began. This past March, a group of 24 people from different universities and non-governmental organizations working directly on the issue of refugees came together for a planning day here at the Gregorian to help shape the conference. That's the history. This is not to be a conference where we talk to one another or listen to people talk at us for several days and then go home. We're colleagues. We're here to share our best practices with one another. We're here to share the challenges that we have on our own campuses in educating our own students about the refugee and migrant situation. We're also here to think, how might we do a better job of bringing education to people living in settlement camps around the world. So we're here to work together, to share what we're doing well, that we're pleased of, to share our challenges and issues that we're facing, and to dream about how we can go forward together in responding to this generational reality. So the second dimension of the conference, and Father Rubens already pointed to it, our hope is that in addition to sharing best practices, that we will leave with those of you who are willing to join together in a network of cooperation to find ways to continue to respond to the education of refugees. So we'll be talking about this network of cooperation on migrant and refugee education many times in the course of the next few days, and at the end invite those of you that are in a position to say, yes, this is something I'd like my institution, my university, my NGO to be a cooperating member of, to join us in building a partnership that will get launched over the next few months. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for all the hard work that we're going to do together, and I'm sure that good things will come out of this good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And I must say that I and the whole team, and I'm sure all of us here in this room, are very glad that you had that walk over the summer. And now we're here, ready to share ideas. And this conference could not happen without a representative of an organization that knows so much about refugees and migrants, that it's, for me, when I'm watching the little clips that you're putting on Twitter, it's unbelievable in how many places in the world you work and how many people you help. Of course, I'm talking about the United Nations High Commission of Refugees, UNHCR, and the representative of this wonderful organization is with us tonight. Mr. Stéphane Jacquemet will give an inaugural address of this conference. Mr. Jacquemet was appointed regional representative for Southern Europe of the UNHCR in April 2016. So I'm guessing you're a very, very busy person. if you're responsible for that region. And he has been working for UNHCR for the last 25 years, starting in the Balkans in '92 in Croatia. And through the years, he's been working in multiple places, from Togo to Lebanon, from Indonesia to Colombia. And it is my real pleasure tonight to ask you to give us the inaugural address tonight, Mr. Stéphane Jacquemont, UNHCR.
Thank you very much. A real pleasure and an honor to be with you. I must say, I'm very proud to be with you as representing UNHCR, but also I'm very happy to myself, Stéphane Jacquemont, to be with you, because I've always thought that education for refugee is a tool, or the main tool, of protecting refugees and creating a future for young refugees. So I really would like to thank the organizers for organizing this conference, to the International Federation of Catholic Universities, to the Pontificia Universitas Gregoriana, the Center for Interreligious Understanding, and being the Blessing Foundation at the Gregorian University in Rome. As President Cernera was just mentioning, I think the very fact that you work during these 3 days will be about creating a network, sharing experiences, and building on best practices, for me, is extremely important. So let me first just highlight the current global situation of refugees. And again, President Cernera has briefly mentioned some figures. I will repeat them because I think it's very important to often repeat them. Today, or let's say at the end of last year, I'm sure that today it's even bigger and a higher number. We had 65.6 million forcibly displaced persons, about 2/3 being displaced in their own country, and 1/3 being refugees in another country. I think, President Cernera, you said that it means that 1 person out of 130 person is a refugee worldwide. But I would also give you another figure. It means that every minute there are 20 new refugees, every single minute. So 84% of the refugees are hosted in low and middle income countries. So everybody says that being the UNHCR regional representative for Southern Europe is not a piece of cake, but I can assure you that it's a piece of cake compared to dealing with the South Sudan refugees, to the Rohingya refugees, and to the Syrian refugees. The so-called Europe refugee crisis in 2015 was not a crisis. It was an identity crisis for Europe, but it was not a refugee crisis. 1.1 million people arriving in Europe in 1 year. Just to remind you that the total population of Europe is 550 million people, is exactly the same number than the refugees arriving in Uganda in 1 year. And Uganda is a country of 35 million people with less resources than Europe. basically 55% of all refugees come from only 3 countries. And this is terrible. It's the Syrian Arab Republic, 5.5 million. It's Afghanistan, 2.5 million. And South Sudan, 1.5 million. Now let's come to education. Of the 6.4 million refugees of primary and secondary school-going age, at least 3.5 million, meaning more than 50%, do not have access to education. It's not a problem, it's a tragedy. At the primary level, at most 61% of refugee children are enrolled in school, compared to 91% of children globally. The gap between refugee youth and youth globally in attending secondary level education is even larger, with only 23% of refugee youth compared with 84% of youth globally. Finally, less than 1% of the refugee youth have access to tertiary education. Difficulties in accessing quality learning, education, and skill-building opportunities was one of the main issues highlighted by refugees youth during the 2016 Global Refugee Youth Consultation. Now, if we take Syrian refugees, the demand for education opportunities, including access to higher education, is particularly high. Let's remember that Syria, before the war, was a country where 26% of the population was enrolled in higher education. So, why shall we educate or offer education opportunities to refugee children? I'm sure that I will be preaching to the converted in this room, but maybe I would just highlight a few points. In the very complex situation of exile for refugees, whether it is in a camp situation or in an urban refugee situation, we, for example, know that most of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, which has a population of 1.2 million refugees for a total population of 4.5, is the highest proportion in the world. So most of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon are in urban environment. They are not in camps. So we have to talk both about camp situation and refugees in urban environment, most of the time in the poor suburbs of big cities. Education is a tool of protection. You just have to realize what is the life of a refugee family of 7, both parents and 5 kids living in one single room of 10 square meters, when the father doesn't have a job, is all the day at home, is depressed, sometimes he's drinking, and most of the time there is a domestic violence against the spouse and against the children. So it's a way of offering a protective environment, sometimes, and it is sad to say that, against the family, but also against the broader environment, particularly for adolescents, because if they don't have education, if they don't have a job, they will be either exploited or tempted with drugs and other artificial things. Opportunity for tertiary education for, let's say, universities, such as scholarship program, and I will elaborate a little bit on the type of scholarship program which is offered at university level, increase the retention and completion rate for secondary education. Secondary education, if it's an end in itself, meaning that there is no possibility to go to university, is a tunnel for adolescents. It's highly frustrating, and sometimes it's better not to have secondary education rather than to have secondary education which cannot be completed through tertiary education. Higher education promotes peace, social cohesion, and development among refugee communities, but also allows them to contribute to the development of host communities. A number of refugee situations are what we call protracted refugee situation, meaning that people have been anywhere between 5 and 25 years in the asylum countries. If we keep people in limbo, their chance for personal development, but also to contribute to development of their host society is absolutely nil. So therefore, the role of education, both for personal development, but also for creating synergies between the refugee community and the host community, is absolutely key. Refugees are also, unfortunately not often enough, but are also returning when the conditions in the country of origin permit. So returnees with high education levels are key drivers to peace, to build peace in a post-conflict situation and to contribute to the reconstruction in their countries of origin. Finally, educated refugees serve as role models for their own community, but they are also a model for the host community, meaning that refugees are not only a burden, but are potentially a good contribution to the country of origin. And something which is rarely mentioned, but I have been witnessing that in a number of refugee situations, if you have refugee with education, they can work. And if they work, they can not only feed their families and contribute to the future of their family, but they can send remittances back to their own country, which is a way of contributing to the rebuilding of their own country. Now, a few words about the role of faith-based organization in the protection of refugees. So, faith-based organizations such as the Catholic Relief Services, Christian Council of Ghana, they are just examples. Don Bosco Mondo or the Lutheran World Federation contribute significantly to UNHCR's largest scholarship program for higher education, the Albert Einstein German Academic Refugee Initiative, usually known as DAFI. It's a program mainly funded by the German government, which, for example, in 2017, has contributed more than 6,000 scholarships for refugee students in more than 50 countries. Through opening their programs to DAFI students, approximately 20 Catholic universities contributed to refugee protection and self-reliance, and to the international development agenda in countries such as Ghana, Mozambique, or Ecuador. In 2016, the Australian Catholic University, Jesuit Worldwide Learning, and other academic institutions founded the Connected Learning in Crisis Consortium, a bit complicated title, known as CLCC. We are talking about connected learning, which is an innovative form of higher education that leverages information technology to combine face-to-face and online learning. It allows students living in remote areas to connect with top universities and to exchange knowledge globally. Since 2010, over 6,500 refugee learners in 11 countries have participated in connected learning programs. So now the importance of partnership and creating new pathway for protection and self-reliance. By partnering with faith-based organizations, UNHCR has increased the range of safe and regulated means by which refugees may reach protection and self-reliance. Government-led programs, for example in Japan, the Japanese Initiative for the Future of Syrian Refugees, Germany, the DAAD, German Academic Exchange Service at the University of Constance, and in France, universities of Toulouse, Montpellier, Nîmes, and Perpignan offer scholarships or student visas for refugees to commence or continue higher education in a third country of asylum. In Japan, a private sponsorship program supported by religious groups, private donors, and corporates offers Syrian students in Jordan to study at Japanese language schools for 2 to 3 years. It is crucial that these programs are designed being protection sensitive in the best interest of the persons of concern and adhering to not only the principle of non-refoulement, meaning that these students should not be sent back to their countries of origin, but also with the possibility to build their future either in the host country or in a responsible way back to their countries of first asylum or their country of origin. So what are our strategic priorities on education as UNHCR? First, we would like, as much as it is possible, to prioritize education from the onset of an emergency. If we take this horrible Rohingya emergency where more than 600,000 Rohingya refugees have been fleeing Myanmar, mostly to Bangladesh, we are aiming at ensuring education for them within the 3 months upon their arrival. It's a big challenge, but it's essential because if the kids miss school for more than 6 months, it usually means that they will miss school for 2, 3 years or for the rest of their life. So there is a small window which is basically no more than a 3 months interruption in their curriculum. The second priority is to enhance inclusion in national education systems. And here I would like to commend countries like Lebanon and Jordan, which are basically overwhelmed with refugee students, but have been able in most places to create 2 shifts. A morning shift, for example, for national students, and an afternoon shift for refugee students. It has been at a very high cost financially for them, but also at high cost for a better education for their own citizens. The third priority is to increase opportunities throughout the life cycle of a refugee. We believe that it's important to have education for all ages. It's important to have primary education. Secondary education is essential because it's the more crucial age in terms of development for adolescents and young adults. And again, university, because only university will create real opportunities in terms of, for example, employment, but also personal development. But we also believe in education for adults, including the elderly. For example, when we have resettlement programs in Canada, in the US, in Europe, mainly for camp population, we very often realize that there is one generation which is sacrificed. Is anywhere between 50 and 80. These people accept to be resettled, knowing there will be no future for them in the new country of asylum, but they sacrifice themselves for the young, for the youth. And this is dramatic because you often visit in apartments in suburbs of the big cities in Europe or in the US, and you see these elderly not speaking the language and staying in the apartment the whole day and just waiting for the grandchildren to be in the apartment in the evening and just, being rewarded through a smile from their grandchildren, but this is not life. So we believe that some form of education is also important for adults and including the elderly. The fourth priority is to have a strong and multi-stakeholder partnership. Education concerns specialized agencies like UNICEF and UNESCO, NGOs, civil society, and the private sector, including employers. It's very important that all these actors are in contact with universities to also help design programs for students, including refugees. I think I will stop here, but I would like to make a final comment. And sorry, it's not very positive. We always tend to believe that there are some human activities, some sectors, which are always positive. We always believe that art is a positive driving force. We tend to believe that universities are always positive forces for change, that they are places for education, for knowledge, but also for solidarity and for an open mind. Unfortunately, history is full of universities which have been places where we increase discrimination in favor of the rich against the poor, where the elite become even more elitist. There are many universities which have a daunting record of discrimination against minorities. There are universities like in Nazi Germany, which were instruments and tools of propaganda. I'm not saying that it is the case of most of the universities today. I still believe that most universities are real places of knowledge and real places where our kids can have a kind of personal blossoming. But we need to remain vigilant. It's also not sufficient to create programs to teach refugee law or to have scholarship for refugees. It needs to be accompanied by other measures. Refugees arriving in a university with all the possible goodwill may be lost. The refugee will be lost because he comes with many handicaps. He has lost his country or her country, lost culture, lost a sense of belonging, and is often very poor. So for that student, it will be even very difficult to socialize with other students, just basically because he or she has no money to pay for a drink or to go to a simple restaurant and to pay for a meal. So I think it's very important that whenever you design a program for refugees, that you offer scholarship, that you take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacquemet, for those very powerful words. And I'm sure everybody in that room will remember what you said in the last sentence. And this is the reason why we're meeting here, to exchange ideas and exchange knowledge like you have. So thank you very much. And I must say, if I may, put a little personal note here. When I saw a little Rohingya refugee, a 7-year-old, so it's the age of my son, when I saw him on the truck reaching for food, as a mother, I had tears in my eyes. And as a scholar, I thought, I'm really happy that this conference is happening, because maybe we'll be able to help this boy at one of our universities in the future. So thank you very much for what your organization is doing and for this inaugural address. And now it's the time for respondents from the academic world. And this is my real pleasure to invite here Dr. Isabel Capelão Gil, rector of the Universidade Católica Portuguesa from Portugal. And the following speakers will be Dr. Jaderson Costa da Costa, Vice Rector of the Pontificia Universidade Católica do Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, and Dr. David Coppola, President of Keystone College, and now Dr. Isabel Capelão Gil from the university in Portugal.
So, good afternoon, dear Dr. Rubens, Father Nuno Gonçalves, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jacquemet. It is my pleasure to be here and to comment, or basically to express and share some of the practices that we at Universidade Católica have been developing regarding this very important issue of migration and refugees. And as Father Rubens said at the outset, to be concrete. So considering what Mr. Jacquemet shared with us just a moment ago, raising our awareness about the dire conditions under which our fellow human beings live throughout the globe, I will share some of the practices and some of the programs that we have been developing at the university. Little steps, but that can grow with the help of our partner universities here, gathered here. And I will speak from a very specific position as a Portuguese living in a country which has, I must say, not witnessed, not experienced the major flow of refugees that countries such as Greece or Italy in Europe have been experiencing. But having said that, this is not due to lack of solidarity. Most of the times it's due to numerous bureaucratic hurdles that prevent the distribution of refugees throughout the European countries. And the first point I want to make has to do with these two categories that we are considering here today, migrants and refugees. Because while all refugees are migrants, not all migrants are refugees. Mr. Jacquemet was pointing out the fact that 2015, the so-called crisis was basically European identity crisis. I believe the crisis was there long before. It just became visible in that summer. And for us, as educators at Catholic universities, the influx of refugees has obscured another reality, the migrants that come to the shores of Europe. That Pope Francis in 2013 addressed so strongly when he spoke about the indifference of Europe and the burial ground that the Mediterranean has become. Because migrants come out of different conditions, perhaps not war and conflict, but also dire conditions. It is true that every minute 20 people become refugees, but if we think about Africa, every 15 seconds a child dies. So these migrants who come to our shores, their plight is perhaps not as visible as that of the Syrians, the Afghans, and the Sudanese. And it is certainly not our responsibility to weigh in on who is in worse condition. But we should, I believe, in our activities and programs, consider this other diaspora, the diaspora of those who seek hope in Europe, who come out of dire social conditions. And this category of migrants, I often think of a text that Hannah Arendt wrote in 1943 called We Refugees, where she writes that the refugees are the vanguard of their people, because they are the ones who are the strongest, who are able to survive. And in this regards, it would be interesting to consider the influx of refugees, and this is our task as educators, not to look at it as an event that fosters a crisis for Europe or that renders a crisis visible, but as an opportunity for Europe to return to its core values, the values that created the Union, the values of solidarity, the values of dignity, the values of sanctuary, the values on which Europe has been built, and that we also seem to forget sometimes. The second point, higher education. So now to more concrete aspects and the importance of universities opening up their campuses to refugees and migrants. A very important point in the talk that was just given was precisely this need to leverage the capacity of universities with market needs, with the needs of the host countries. Because these situations may not be short-term or temporary situations for refugees or for migrants. So their integration into our courses, into our campuses, it is our task, I believe, not simply to include them in our programs, but to also be able to place them in the labor market. So to create, foster, a relationship with our partners in the global market. And so the first example I wish to share with you, the first experience, the first instance, is precisely has to do with sometimes a disjunction between what we are asked to do as universities from the stakeholders who organize the presence or the caretaking for migrants and refugees, and these needs, so the possibilities of articulating the two things. The Portuguese Council of Rectors is made up of 15 universities, and just last month we were asked by the 3 platforms in the country that sponsor refugees, the President Jorge Sampaio Initiative for Syrian Refugees, the Jesuit Service for Refugees, and the Joint Relief Platform, to host a small number, it is true, of refugees who wish to pursue their studies in higher education in Portugal. Keep in mind that Portugal has up to now only received 600 refugees, and not out of incapacity, but out of bureaucratic issues. So 36 students, a list of students with coming from mostly from Syria, but also from Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, and other places, listed also with the sort of degrees they want to pursue. All of these students are housed in the Lisbon region, which means that only 4 universities out of the 15 in the Council of Rectors will be able to host them, because their accommodation is in the urban area of Lisbon. And out of these 36 students, 22 want to take degrees in law. Now, this is where the disjunction between let's say the will and the prospects of the students, the capabilities of the institutions, and the possibility of inclusion in the European market become troubling. Law is certainly a degree that enjoys high prestige, but law is a degree that is very much linked to the national context. So to train 22 students from diverse areas who do not manage the language, but that is of minor concern, because this is our task to train them and build capacity in this regard. The issue comes after. What happens after the degree is completed? Will they be able to follow up and develop a working capacity in the host country? And secondly, if we are intent on building also capacity for the countries of origin, what will it mean for a degree like this, law taken in Portugal or Spain or Italy, for someone who will then practice in Iraq or Afghanistan or Sudan? We must be aware of these contradictions so that our practices of inclusion will not result in a future exclusion. And this is, I believe, a difficult issue, because it takes negotiation, mentoring, and understanding what the possibilities for real inclusion are. And it requires, this is why I felt it was so important to speak about the integration with other stakeholders other than universities in the host countries. We have to work with our partners in the market to integrate the students that we are training, just as we do for our national students. So to develop trainee schemes is something that is tremendously important. What have we, as Universidade Católica, been doing for these students? Out of this group, we are going to integrate 6. So far, we have 5 Syrian students. We are working on 3 levels. One, tuition waiver and scholarships for incoming students. But we're also working with 2 of our institutes, the Institute of Oriental Studies, to create a handbook for best practices for migrants and refugees. Most of the small issues and small problems that have arisen result from cultural issues, from cultural misconceptions. And it is very important that these students have tutors and mentors that will guide them through the process. Some of these, one of the tutors is a faculty member, another one is a fellow student who helps accompany them through the studies. A dictionary of, in this case, Arabic to Portuguese has also been created, and our chaplain and the School of Theology are extremely active in working with them. All of the students that we have integrated so far are Muslims, and working with them for integrating them and discussing with them in issues of interfaith dialogue. But we need to do more. So this is what we've done responding to platforms. We need to do more. And for that, we have started with a small step. We've created a fund called the Pope Francis Fund that has 3 main targets. One is Portuguese students in situations of social fragility, but the larger part of the fund is for migrants and refugees. The fund started with financing from the university itself, but private donors, our sponsors, and alumni have been forthcoming in giving to this fund. So the intent of the fund is basically to allow the university to be more inclusive and to work beyond the tuition waiver, to really provide a situation where, and funds that will allow the students to live with dignity in our country. With the 3 platforms that I referred to, we are working on issues of visa, the vetting schemes of these students coming into the country. And as I've said, this is a program that has started recently. Our work with the platform started in 2016. The fund has just been created, so it's little steps, but we are confident that we'll be able to move forwards with confidence. The third point that I wanted to make is has to do with the collaborative effort inside the community of the university. And also basically responding to what has already been said. There are 3 main levels where the migrancy and refugee issue needs to be active and visible. On the one hand, the academic initiatives, seminars, courses, and other activities that sponsor the activities of our students vis-à-vis understanding the realities of migrancy and refugees. Second level is research. And in this regard, I wish to share a project that has been recently approved called From Conflict to Conviviality Through Art and Culture. It's Horizon 2020 project, which brings together academics, artists, migrant communities, and displaced persons. And it has a 3-fold objective: to deepen knowledge about the transition from conflict into peace, to empower artistic practices as a mode of intercultural mediation, and to empower these migrant communities to represent themselves, to utter their traumas and their issues through art practices. It's a consortium of 4 universities, 6 museums, and NGOs, and it's a good instance, I would say, of collaborative research, of bringing the university with stakeholders to empower refugees. Finally, the final point. Many of the activities we tend to organize are top-down initiatives. Rectors and presidents are committed to enact policies, and we can work to devise programs, to instill and give funds to attract students, but there's something more that needs to be done. That needs to be worked bottom up. We need to hear and empower student-led activities and activities that are faculty-led, so to listen to our community. With the creation of the fund that I referred to and the dissemination of the fund, many faculty members have come to us to tell us about what they have been doing, opening up their houses to host migrant families, creating a platform where faculty and their families can enroll and say that they're available to receive either families or unaccompanied youths or students who want to come to Portugal. And our students as well have organized by themselves initiatives that are completely student-led, some with an academic dimension, others with a social dimension, but specifically dedicated to host, to accommodate, to integrate the new students coming into our campus. And this has been, I would say, a truly endearing moment, surprising at times, of what our communities can do beyond the will and the policies of presidents' offices or rectors' offices. Finally, and to go back to my initial point that hosting refugees, developing programs for migrants may be an opportunity not only for Europe but for our universities as well to re-engage with our own values, to interpellate us all to rethink our social contract, and even to think that in different conditions we may all, as Hannah Arendt said, we may all be refugees.
Thank you, Madam Rector. I think this was one of the answers also to your call, Mr. Jacquemet, because on a human level of empowering refugees, Portugal is a great example, and hearts opened up in your country. And thank you for this address tonight. And now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Jaderson Costa da Costa, Vice Rector of the Pontificia Universidade Católica do Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Initially, I'd like to thank the invitation of the organized committee to attend this section. When we talk about education, we talk about people. In this humanistic quest, in view of the person's central role and development, the university must be attentive to the community dimension, through the synergy of the various forces of actions, of the various forces, areas of knowledge that constitute the university, thus stressing the dimension of responsibility, solidarity, and professional competence at the university. The university should be the place where the fundamental issues that have an influence on the person and society are addressed. In this sense, university culture must be based on an integral conception of the human being. This conception implies that every human being is considered the foundation, the purpose, and the object of all institutions in which social life is expressed and realized. The university expects to do much more than train competitive professionals for the labor market, as it has been its common practice. You live in a civilization that idolizes production, consumption, and money as supreme values, where everything is measured in terms of operability and efficiency, and you often forget values such as justice, solidarity, freedom, and equality. If the university wants to succeed in the development of the common generation, it must produce a human being capable of knowing on itself and living in harmony with this globalized and holistic world. Violation of human dignity in modern civilization that even lead to the exclusion or even elimination of individuals leaves some to doubt the viability of an equitable, peaceful, and pacifying society. The way the human being has been valued has induced distortions such as greed, envy, avarice, arrogance, and indifference. But what can the university do to transform society? The World Conference on Higher Education, held in 1998, reinforced that the mission of higher education institutions is to educate, train, and conduct research, and in particular to contribute to the sustainable development and the improvement of society as a whole. It's hoped to promote, generate, and disseminate knowledge through research, and as part of its extension activity to the community, offer relevant advisory services to help societies in their cultural, social, and economic development. Thus, promoting and developing scientific and technological research, as well as academic studies in the social, human science, and curatorship in arts. This requires ethical standards, critical capacity, and work with society. The university should play an important role in citizenship education, stimulate the formation of students capable of perceiving the world around them and willing to solidarity as well community actions. You must not forget the importance of gratuitous human interaction and the cultivation of our relationship. The purpose of our meeting is how Catholic Confessional University contribute decisively and voluntarily to alleviate the suffering of our refugees and migrant brothers. Brazil has become the main recipient of asylum claims in the Southern Cone region. The number of the new claims submitted in the country increased by more than 2,020% in recent years. Data obtained of United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees reveal almost 78,000 persons of concern in Brazil. Of these, more than 8,800 are refugees from Syria, Angola, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and others. Nearly 4,000 asylum seekers, mainly from Haiti, grant permanent residency based on humanitarian grounds, and more than 8,400 visas were granted under the special visa program for people affected by the Syrian conflict. Now I would like to present a brief overview of our actions geared towards refugees and migrants at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul. Our university supports the government efforts to take part in the Municipal Committee for the Attention of Immigrants, Refugees, Stateless Persons, and Victims of Human Trafficking of the Municipal Department of Human Rights. The university has created two executive groups for their actions with refugees and migrants, Solidarity Network, and the educational volunteering. The Solidarity Network is an interdisciplinary group of professors, staff members, and students with the purpose of building responsible policies and social actions in line with the problems of the society and the world. The working group on human mobility has the objective of mapping within the university a network of services to mediate actions on behalf of refugees and immigrants living in our state. One of the examples is the academic awareness actions and on food and clothes campaigns for immigrants in order to collect non-perishable food and clothes for refugees and immigrants. The educational volunteering focuses on development of citizenship and social transformation, resulting on student engagement in activities as education, counseling, and legal assistance. Support of refugees, immigrants, support, is changed? Yeah, okay. Support of refugees and immigrants' rights through human rights advisory service for immigrants and refugees at service organized and run by the Law School and the Pastoral and Solidarity Center. In the same line, was created a legal assistance service offering free service dealing with issues about migrations, visas, and renewal, labor and social security law, requests for refuge, and referrals application for naturalization of Brazilian nationality for foreign children of Brazilian parents. The counseling program of the psychology course of the university meets the demands related to emotional, physical, and social vulnerability of refugees and immigrants. Regarding education, the university implemented the Portuguese language program for refugees and immigrants in partnership with Caritas of Porto Alegre. The goal is to teach Portuguese for refugees and immigrants, but also to help them put together a curriculum that can help them find jobs. Finally, I'd like to present a brief video of this emotional moment. I think that this video does not need the translation. You can feel the emotion of this. Can you? Okay, excuse me. Yeah.
Receber, então, o atestado de participação do curso de português para imigrantes e refugiados é a aluna Actis Magdala.
Bom, quanto aos haitianos, então, aqui, eles começaram a chegar aqui há uns 3, 4 anos atrás. E alguns acessaram o nosso projeto social aqui da paróquia, que é sacola de alimentos, roupas. Isso nos levou a nos questionar que era pouco, né, fazer isso. Né? Aí vamos ver o que mais que era. Uma grande dificuldade deles, dos imigrantes haitianos, aí outros estrangeiros também, é a língua. Surgiu aí essa possibilidade de fazer uma parceria então, com a PUC, né, e com a Caritas Diocesana e começar um curso de português funcional.
Eu cheguei no Brasil em 2015.
Na verdade, assim, o foco é ensinar um básico da língua portuguesa, pensando em termos de uma comunicação primeira, né, no sentido de apresentação, se apresentar, dizer seus dados profissionais, né, visando possibilitar que eles consigam ser um pouco mais proficientes, né, na busca de um emprego, de localização de espaço de moradia, de trabalho. Né?
Então, o encerramento do curso hoje aqui, dessa etapa, é ele se apresentar em português. Eu sou fulano de tal, moro em tal lugar e sei fazer tal coisa.
Eu sou haitiana, eu tenho 22 anos. Eu sou cabeleireira.
Eu sou brasileiro.
É muito importante para aprender português. O curso eu foi estudar melhor para nós, porque eu falo bem pouquinho português.
Eu quero fazer mais curso para falar português muito bem.
Então isso aí está sendo muito positivo, né? A parceria, nós as três entidades da parceria, PUC, Caritas e nós aqui na igreja temos decidido de manter o segundo semestre.
Seja bem-vindo. Só estava faltando você aqui. Faz tempo que nós não cantamos mais, mas vamos ensaiar. Vamos lá. 1, 2, 3. Você que está chegando, bem-vindo, seja bem-vindo.
This is our effort that put together professors and students. You know, it's too little, but we are doing our part, and you know that should, of course, increase these actions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrison. Indeed, the numbers are huge in Brazil, comparing to the numbers we have in Europe. But you showed that for you, these are definitely not numbers, but people. So thank you for your address. And now I turn the microphone to Dr. David Coppola, president of Keystone College in the United States.
Thank you. I'm the president of a college. I'm one of about 800 rural colleges in the United States that were founded primarily by Christian groups. And most of the work that we do is with migrant workers. Very few refugees at this point, but most of our experience and models that we have built have been in response to migrant workers. For example, I'm in Northeast Pennsylvania, and one farmer there employs 150 migrant workers every season. And my college partners with him, and we try to provide camps for the children as well as supplemental education. There are, as I said, about 800 other colleges like mine of about 2,000 students, and this is just part of the fiber and fabric of who we are. But the fact that we're gathered together to seek solutions and find even better models to the problem of the 65.6 million people have been forced from their homes. It seems overwhelming, but I think if you just look at a small college like mine, you can see bit by bit, piece by piece, small pieces will fit together to larger pieces to make something amazing happen. It doesn't happen overnight. Perhaps you remember Paul VI presaged in 1967 in his encyclical letter, Populorum Progresso, where he said that he notes that the structures of violence are built into societies that do not seriously address poverty or unemployment or oppression or exclusion, discrimination, and non-access to technological or basic resources. 50 years later, we're still contending with these difficult and perilous structures. And to push it back a little bit further, about 150 years ago, there was a president in the United States whose name was Abraham Lincoln, and he was the 16th president of the United States, and he led the United States through its Civil War, which was a terrible moral and political catastrophe. And he, at his inaugural address in 1861, he appealed to the people of the South not to engage in a war, not to separate. And he said, "We must not be enemies. Though our passions may have strained, we must not break our bonds of affection. We must seek out the better angels of our nature." And so now I apologize for the temporal whiplash, but now in 2011, a Harvard professor, Steven Pinker, wrote a book, just that, a substantial book called The Better Angels of Our Nature. And he proposes 4 better angels for us as human beings, and I thought they were so apt for our conference today. He proposes empathy, self-control, a moral sense, and reason, and I'll mention them quickly because I know that this conversation will continue not only for the next few days, but I hope for the next many years. There are hundreds of instances in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scriptures and in the lived experiences of people of goodwill, that it's the clear, unambiguous message that we're obligated to care for foreigners or strangers, many of whom are refugees. And in a deference to Rabbi Jack Bemperat, I see is here, one of my rabbis, thank you, is a wonderful example of a teacher as well as a truly remarkable human being. Israel's empathy for strangers is a paradigm for ethical principles and the practice of compassion and justice. The overwhelming emphasis on empathy for the other, for the stranger, flows, where does it come from? It flows from a place of gratitude to God for rescuing the Israelites from slavery. But it also flows, and someone else mentioned it earlier, from this practical place that we know that our circumstances can change quickly for the worst. And every one of us could find ourselves a stranger. And so for that reason, and for those reasons, for the call to be people of gratitude, we need to overcome our fears and welcome strangers to live among us. And as I said, the scriptures are filled with these. But by practicing an authentic spirituality of gratitude, we can be guided by compassion and empathy and live passionately for justice and mercy. Careful anthropological studies and mathematical calculations convincingly demonstrate that it's statistically impossible for every person on the planet not to be related. How you doing, cuz? We are all cousins. It's impossible for us not to be related. And at a conference such as this, we could probably all nod our heads and, agree on this fine, somewhat abstract conclusion. But the implications and the opportunities and the challenges for us to embrace a deep compassion and preferential option for the poor will only be achieved when we embrace the poor and the vulnerable into our countries, our communities, our universities, and our homes. And thus, we invite God into our daily living among the needy. And from the Gospel of St. Matthew, whatever you did to the least of these, that you did for me. Empathy. Self-control. Self-control is not merely adopting a stoic, temperament of discipline and restraint born of deprivation. Authentic self-control is cultivated from a deep respect for every person, and in Pope Francis's own word from Laudate Si, it demands before all else an appreciation of the immense dignity of the poor in the light of our deepest convictions as believers. Number 158. And so colleges and universities can be an important voice and can be important voices in the moral and cultural discourses of the nation and society. We have a duty to contribute to the common good by helping to shape public policy and contribute to the ethical sustenance, security, law and justice, meaningful labor and leisure, volunteerism, mutual respect, and the promotion of cultural resources such as art and drama and music. And as long as we're in Italy, don't forget food, okay? None of which takes place in a society unduly influenced by exaggerated fears or prejudices. Many of these universal goods and associated rights and responsibilities were asserted by Pope John XXIII in Pacem in Terris in 1963. He affirmed that every human has certain rights which flow from the common good. And some of those rights include, as you may recall, the right to freely choose one's state of life and education. They also include the right to emigrate and immigrate, number 25, and the right to participate in the political process, number 26. And so colleges and universities, we have a special role and responsibility to call out or educare, to lead out the dignity and the best talents and gifts of each person in an environment that is respectfully self-controlled and is committed to civility and ethics. A moral sense. Why has our noble tradition of hospitality and care for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, why has it been unduly overshadowed by utilitarian and economic motivations, resulting in a simplistic analysis that somehow the other is a problem or even a nuisance? How has that happened in our lifetime? One possibility is that we may need to recover a practical and moral answer to the question posed in the parable of the Good Samaritan: who is my neighbor? Colleges and universities have a great opportunity to cultivate experiences of neighborhoods, both on colleges and both on their campuses rather, and in the surrounding areas, where every year diverse strangers are joined together to learn with and learn from each other and live in mutual respect. Of course, those groups are generally homogeneous. But as young people learn to coexist in a safe and respectful community, we cannot underestimate how they are being positively formed to internalize a moral sense of community, neighborhood, while contributing to the common good. As I shared earlier, I have about 2,000 students in my college, and they volunteer an average of about 26,000 hours per year. They're not required to, it's just in their blood. It's what they want to do. So adopting and supporting even a few homeless students and a few migrants has deepened and expanded the experiences for them beyond conventional practice, and has invited transformational results for all. On the other hand, it's not possible to adopt millions of refugees onto all our campuses, right? Or perhaps it is. Perhaps it is. How can we be good neighbors in a diverse and interdependent world and find ways to be constructive and inclusive and engage refugees as our neighbor? Affordable access to the internet has allowed more than 2 billion people to be connected online. The BBC estimates that a blog is created every second. The Library of Congress in the United States holds tens of millions of pages. YouTube has made the music of the world, some of it's better than others, available to all. And Google Art, the Google Art Project, connects the work of more than 8,000 artists with our personal devices, and Google estimates more than 31 billion searches happen per month. So the increasing access and dissemination of communication and information will not diminish. In fact, it'll exponentially increase every 2, 3, 4 years tops. These technological developments offer incredible opportunities for people all over the world to communicate. We have, in practice, recreated the answer to the perennial question, who is my neighbor? And so if we are all connected as neighbors, are we not ethically bound then to one another to promote the benefits of all the Earth's resources now and for future generations? The way is open to us. The will is now ours to take. And finally, the fourth better angel of our nature is reason. Empathy, self-control, and moral sense flow from a faith-centered and biblical convictions of the dignity of all people. But education, as has been said over and over again, has the potential to reach to the core of the questions of human existence and can lead us to greater moral responsibility, including a deeper commitment to the ongoing quest for truth. So to regain our ethical center, I believe we must recommit ourselves to critical and careful discernment of the signs of the times and act accordingly. We've all been brought to deeper compassion and insights by our own teachers and mentors. And education has the responsibility of education has the responsibility of preserving, developing, and passing on the best of a tradition of respect for the stranger and refugees. In this way, we are drawn together inextricably. And finally, there is much that colleges and universities can do to form our students to internalize the better angels of our nature in responding to the refugee and immigrant crisis, empathy that flows from gratitude for our own blessings, self-control born of mutual respect for the dignity of others, a moral sense that we are all interdependent neighbors, and reason that reminds us to walk humbly with our God and revere the wisdom of the past and practice prudence in the present. About 150 years ago, in this noble institution, we might have been discussing how many angels could fit on the head of a pin. Today, we gather together to focus on the pinpoints, the places of focus and collaboration where we can be angels for our brothers and sisters in need. People of goodwill and their leaders should reconsider diversity in the stranger and refugees as a source of strength, revitalization, and creativity, rather than seen as a threat to security or unity, as some have mistakenly exaggerated and characterized it. Education will help us to become our best selves and will be the opportunity for us to fortify and support not only refugees, but I believe also to repair and restore our own honor and integrity. Many thanks to those who organized this conference and all of you who have given of your time to participate and for being the better angels of all of our natures these days and years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Coppola. In fact, in 1982, my compatriot, John Paul II, and the patron of my university, Pontifical University of John Paul II in Krakow, wrote a letter to your boss, Mr. Jacquemet, to you and High Commissioner for Refugees, and he called a refugee situation a shameful wound of our time. And I think that Dr. Coppola's address proved that universities do have to act accordingly to heal that wound and overcome fears and welcome strangers. And thank you so much for those words. Thank you to all our speakers today that gave wonderful addresses. And we have 5 minutes to end this session, this inaugural session. But this is definitely a good 5 minutes to have a little Q&A session and to take your questions. And just little technical things that I would like to announce before our Q&A session, before the reception starts, for which we welcome, and it's right next door to the right when you go out of this room. Please turn back your headphones before going to reception. And now if I could ask the ladies to distribute the microphones to anyone who has questions. This is the time for them. There is a question there, gentlemen.
Thank you all for your speeches. Stefan, I wanted to ask you, you prioritise various sorts of education for refugees in camps. One little piece that I thought was missing was preschool. How does UNHCR stand in terms of the provision of preschool? Because the research shows that preschool is critical for the life trajectory of students.
Yes.
Thank you. I think it's a good question, and I would say we consider it as extremely important for a number of reasons, because precisely what I said about very often the family situation of most refugee kids living in a kind of a very tense environment with extremely vulnerable parents and depressed parents. So preschool in that sense would be also very important. It would be extremely important to provide learning and job opportunities for the mother. So in that sense, we believe that it is also essential. So we have a number of successful programs where we try to engage other refugees in preschool activities. It's easier because we can train people. It takes less time, sorry to say that, than if we want to have a refugee teacher for example, secondary education, because there we need people who were already teachers before moving as refugees. So we can do it. Now, if it comes to basically funding those activities, it's unfortunately very often the last one on the list, because we have a legal obligation to provide primary education. So primary education is an obligation, it's a legal obligation. And then, of course, we would invest in secondary education, and then I would say equally between tertiary education and preschool education. So unfortunately, in reality, because of funding, it's often not the primary objective of organization. Not that we consider it as non-important, but basically because of the overwhelming need in terms of, I would say, primary education first and then secondary education.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Here, Father.
I wonder if one of the speakers would comment on the role of universities in fighting the toxic ideologies which are doing so much damage to people who are forced to flee.
What kind of ideologies are you referring to?
You can imagine.
Well,
by association. So the problem, if I spoke, then people would assume I'm talking about the United States. So this is, you know, it's
if you're referring to xenophobia and things like that, yes. Well, it is that's where we need to work with our own communities inside the campus, right? I must say that culturally speaking, where I come from in Portugal, Portugal has a cosmopolitan tradition, which does not mean that there are not pockets of racism, and to not acknowledge this is a problem. So what we need to do, what we do basically, not what we need to do, what we do basically, is to, it's not really to have special seminars that refer to this, but to make clear that human dignity and the recognition of the other as our own, independently of race, ethnicity, religion, or culture, is something that cuts across all disciplines, whether you're teaching mathematics or political science. I don't believe it's a subject that needs to be or should be camped around one specific set of issues, but that needs to work across the board. And it's an issue, of course, that is very much to our heart and that we discuss with faculty. It's especially important, And even though I mentioned that issues of xenophobia and racism are not culturally prevalent in Portugal, when we have an international campus, as most of us do, these issues arise. We have students from multiple religions. A survey that we did proves that 30% of our students are Catholic practitioners, 40% more are Catholics, but non-practicing. And then we have a very big number of students who come from other religions or have no religion at all. And especially with international students who are mostly non-Catholics, come from, in our case, 91 different countries. The cultural differences come to the fore. Give you an example, which happened with me, one of my classes, speaking about the Armenian genocide. Turkish students in the room, Armenian students, Israeli students, Portuguese students, American students, French students. It is important to have them voice their concerns. I think the seminar needs to be a place where they voice and then be pedagogical about how they place the problem. And it's troubling at times, but I strongly believe that they need to feel that there is a space where they can voice, even though in some situations these utterances may be considered maybe racist or problematic for us. It is then our task to combat them, but they have to be able to utter them. Otherwise, we will not solve the problem.
Thank you very much, and that's definitely an issue that we can continue discussing tomorrow and Friday. I kindly remind you that our session tomorrow starts early at 8:45, as it is signed in the program. So I am hoping that you will take some rest after the journey, enjoy Rome this evening, and I remind you to return your headphones first, and then we will welcome you at the reception next door. Thank you very much for this inaugural session, and we'll continue discussing the issue of refugees and migrants in the globalized world tomorrow and Friday. Thank you.